I came out this morning to photograph the Disappearing Tarn, which is normally about where my shoulder is. Typically it tends to fill up after about 100 to 150 millimetres rain or a massive snow melt. And on the way down, the rocks leach their minerals into the water, turning it this beautiful kind of aqua blue, which you don't expect to see at all. And it's probably more something you'd see in glacial rivers, actually. It's not really a solid base, so what happens is you get so much water and it fills it up and then it just slowly drains out the bottom again. And there is a kind of a creek that runs underneath here and comes out down near the bottom, which is part of the water source for the local area. So while it's disappointing, I did see down this way there's a log covered in moss, and I'm hoping I might get some good macro photography in there. And there might be some other little micro scenes that aren't apparent from this distance. And to be honest, whenever I come up here, it's filled with water. So there's a lot down here that I would never see. Anyway, let's go have a look. It's actually quite a way up off the ground, so I need to be a little careful. It's a little bit steep here, and it's also a little bit slippery. But the log is really interesting, and there's a lone plant coming up out of the log there. I've got my 100mm macro on the camera right now because I thought maybe I can do some really good close-ups, and I think this might actually set the scene and make it look like it's bigger than it really is. I'm about 1.5 to 2 meters away, which means I should be able to get a decent depth of field without resorting to focus stacking. Your typical lens is clearest at about f9, f11, but because this one goes all the way to f32, I should be able to get a decent clarity even around f20. So what I'm going to do, adjust the focus so that the foreground is in focus, and that should hopefully give that little tree some focus as well. So let's have a look at that. So that's not bad. That's at f8. So let's push that out to f20. Make that a longer exposure. And when we check that focus now, you'll see that is nicely in focus, as is the foreground. In fact, all the way down to the front. So now that I've got that first shot out of the way, I've got my settings right. Now I can concentrate on the composition. And again, it's a little precarious here, so I'm really limited to where I can actually put the tripod. But clearly I can't go handheld because there's not enough light. We've got these big rocks which aren't particularly stable, at least some of them, big holes in between, and my tripod, as you can see, is kind of like it's stable, but one knock and I'm going to lose the whole thing, so I need to be really careful. So I've set up this composition to give the appearance of a much bigger, grander scene. It's kind of like one of those minimalist shots of a lone tree sitting up on a hill. Only in this case it's a large tree and there's a smaller tree off to the left on a rolling hillside. You can see from up above there's a lot of gaps between the moss, but when you come down to the level of the camera, you'll see those gaps have disappeared. In fact, you get to where the camera lens is, they're almost gone completely. We do need to get that f-stop down quite tight because we're a lot closer now. It's about 1 metre away, so unlike before where I was 2 metres away and got quite a lot of depth of field, here I'm only 1 metre away, so I need to pull that aperture down even more. I'm going to do this on f25, and that should extend the focal depth of field to just before the small tree to just after the larger one. So we want to focus on the small tree. And let's do that. When you head out with high expectations, you're gearing yourself up for disappointment. So even though I didn't quite find what I wanted down here, I did find a couple of nice compositions, which I'm really happy with, and I hope you enjoyed those as well. If you have a look around, the fog's starting to close in, so we might actually get a couple of good pictures along the way back. And if I do, I'll throw them in right now. But other than that, thank you for coming along on this journey. It's been interesting, and I'll catch you next time.